Welcome back, everyone, to Neighbors in the Network. I'm James Pinedo, your host. Today, I'm joined with a very special guest, Anne-Marie Miller, the Communications and Content Associate at EdChoice. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us today.
For sure. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It is really our pleasure. And when Brooke was telling us about you and nominating you to be on this podcast, Brooke Medina, our great first guest, I was like, well, we got to find out more about you. So I'm excited. Tell me, although before we dive into you and like your background and all that good stuff, we're all just getting back from annual meeting. How was SPN's annual meeting this year for you?
SPN was great. A bit overwhelming, a lot of people all at the same time. And I think post-COVID, you're still kind of getting your legs under you, being in spaces with everybody. But it was so great to connect. LinkedIn and email doesn't do enough. It's so great to see good friends in person and then realize, I got into the Liberty movement in 2015. So, I mean, some of the people that I'm reconnecting with, we've been, I've known them for like going on 6, 7, 8 years, and that's kind of crazy to think about. But it's really cool to have that feeling of community and friendship and kinship, and that we're all kind of moving through these different phases of our lives, but we're still connected. And it's just a great way to bring everybody together.
I love it. I'm glad to hear it. Were there any aha moments or like, oh, I see a connection that I haven't made before?
In terms of like people or ideas?
Ideas more than people.
Ideas. Let's aha moments. Well, it was funny. I was visiting with a partner, actually, Brene, who's also works with Brooke at Locke Foundation, and we were in a corridor, and she stopped Hannah Cox, who is a well-known formerly at FEE. Her and Brad they run Base Politics, and as we were talking to her, it was just funny because I follow her and I love the content that they put out, and so seeing her in person, I was like, don't be too much of a fangirl. But it was great to pick her mind because, in addition to the fact that, I'm doing content and stuff for EdChoice, and both her and Brene are very talented content and marketing specialists. It was fun talking to her because I've started my own venture on the side, and to be able to pick her brain about, content creation and then kind of the deeper passions behind what she's trying to do with Base Politics, which had a lot of kind of overlap with what I'm trying to do with my side gig of, helping people, what's it called? Helping people access enterprise and unlock enterprise, because that's really the foundation of our economy and that's the foundation of prosperity. And so I'm really passionate about removing those roadblocks for people so that we can have more businesses and less small business failures, and just be more prosperous overall as a society, because we have people that are doing what they love, serving other people, and then, helping run the economy based on that. And so it was a cool interaction with her, because it helped me kind of realize, in addition to the fact that I love doing what I'm doing because it aligns with some of my passions, it's also very much in aligned with, the aspects of liberty, of free enterprise, and of just, the human spirit and drive for, excellence and success and what they do, and freedom, prosperity. I'm like all the words. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I was doing a little bit of research and I came across that company that you started. Éxito is what it's called.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it sounds brilliant. We'll have to talk more about that maybe towards the end. But I'm glad that what I saw was it's very much right in your wheelhouse is education,
For
and that's exactly what you're doing at EdChoice right now.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I want to talk more about that. But tell me a little bit before we get into the now. Tell me about the past. What can you tell me about your background? Where did you grow up? How did that shape you and then lead you to working in the network?
You know what's funny? I was actually having a lot of these conversations at SPN, and I reflect on them often. Thinking back on, my upbringing. So I'm, what's it called? My dad is from Chicago. Basic kind of immigrant family from Germany, from Canada, in his bloodline, and he's very Republican, staunch Republican. So I remember like just following in his steps and being very red meat, not understanding kind of the gravity of the what or the why, but just like, this is what my dad believes. So yeah, duh, this is how it is. And my mom is actually, she immigrated here from Mexico. And so having kind of those two cultures, and she also, very brilliant woman, but with politics, maybe is not, you would also kind of follow my dad's lead and like, okay, this is what we're doing and stuff. And so I'm very thankful for that, because I think it kind of made it easier for me to fall into where I am now, which is pretty moderate, like libertarian and free thinking, freedom minded. And so I grew up in Chicago, and when I was 18, I moved to North Carolina, went to a small liberal arts college called Brevard, which was like 800 people total in the college, in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Beautiful, beautiful place. But it was a little too small for me because, funny, even though my mom spoke Spanish, I wasn't taught Spanish as a kid, but I was in a lot of rooms where there were a lot of people that spoke Spanish, and I always felt like the odd one out. So it kind of like birthed this drive in me of like, I want to learn Spanish. And then also, I'm grateful for where I grew up, and I think my parents they did a good job. I know everybody, as we talk about a lot in education, people think about the schools, and I went to really good public schools, that had AP classes, woodworking, 4 or 5 languages, band, drama, art. And I didn't realize how much, I did all of those things, and speech and volunteering and things like that. And so I was just I'm very thankful for all those opportunities afforded to me. And it was very clear when I went to North Carolina to a small liberal arts college, that is not the case for everybody across the spectrum. So, I was doing AP classes and honor rolls and things like that. And also like where I happened to be in Chicago was like geographically diverse. So we had people that were from, West Asia Minor, so like Iraq, Iran, maybe Syria. We had, a lot of people from, African Americans, Black community, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Lithuanians and Polish people, Greeks, so there was just a lot of people. And then also like what was very unique about my high school was not only was it very demographically different, but also economically different. So again, you have people that are recently immigrated to the US, you have people that have been here for several generations. And so it created a spread of, different incomes of kids. And I'm really thankful that I grew up in that environment, because, I love my parents. They, never went without anything I didn't need. But seeing some of those students who could afford to do like $10,000 summer break or, spring breaks when we were in high school, which was something, $10,000-$15,000 was just something my parents like could not afford and was not, in the realm of possibility for me. But seeing that gave me something to drive for, because I think some of these students have family abroad and things. It was just I was always piqued my curiosity of like, I want to go, I want to learn languages, I want to try to find my path out of the US. And one of my teachers told me about study abroad when I was a junior. And so I was like, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to find whatever I can do to study abroad. And so I ended up in the liberal arts college, which was great, beautiful, but not enough opportunity for those things, right? They had like one language course, and I was already in the top language course when I started for Spanish. And so I moved to Western Carolina University, which is in the Western Hills of North Carolina, about an hour west of Asheville, and 10,000 students, much bigger school, really big language department, business, economics. I mean, the world was really my oyster. And so I started with international relations, business, and languages. So I was like, something of here is going to take me out of the country. Like, just got to be that way. I had to study there 1 year before they would let me study abroad. So I picked up, basic business classes, econ classes, Spanish classes. And I started learning Japanese too, because I was like, what the heck, I've had 6 years of Spanish, so why not go for something that's really crazy? And it was in those classes that I started to see, we were talking about liberalism and international relations, and we were also talking about liberalism, the idea of, free markets and property rights and rule of law and things like that in the international relations context, but then also in economics, in basic econ. And I'll never forget my professor, Ed Lopez, who's still there. He had they had scholarships for students to go to different seminars. And there was a sign on his door. It was like $200 to go to the College of Charleston for this Liberty thing. And I was like, poor broke college student. Yeah, money. And I did the math on gas and stuff. I was like, if I plan this right, I'll make a little bit of money, and, we'll go on a road trip to Charleston. I'd never been there. And so I go to the College of Charleston, and And I just sat through several sessions and, being a nerd, the nerd that I am, I was like, this is fascinating. They talked about what is liberalism and what is liberty. I think it was put on at the College of Charleston, but I think it was like Students for Liberty or something. It was like related with one of those organizations. But it was just all about liberty and justice. And we learned about the 3 different types of justice. And I was just it just made sense to me. And so that was one of the moments where, thinking back to my dad's upbringing, I was glad that, although, even though now we fight about politics because I have more economic and policy, knowledge in certain areas. I was glad that I was brought up that way because I think it makes so much more sense when I started to learn the underlying theories of liberalism and, Hayek versus Keynes and econ. It just made so much sense to me because I was like, duh, yeah, of course. And so that started on what I call, conference hacking as a student. Every time there was money, anywhere there was money to go to conferences, I would go every which way. And so I went to DC and I went to Atlanta and I went back to College of Charleston several times and Charlotte. So I just went all over the place, going to all these different conferences, meeting people who are now in the Liberty movement, which is really fun. And just like soaking up everything that I could about this idea of liberty, right? And the people were fun and the conversations were good. And it was just a great time. And then finally, 1 year passes, I was able to go abroad. And Students for Liberty actually has an international network. So when I was studying in Spain, I attended their Students for Liberty meetup in Ireland and in the Czech Republic. And so now I'm meeting and making international connections of other people that are also really passionate about liberty, but come from very different backgrounds, different languages, different governance structures. And I had a lot of fun, being in Spain, learning all those things, and then also building simultaneously this international network of connections of people who, are still related to different movement organizations and affiliates and things today. So it's really fun. And then after 4 months in Japan, I came back to the States for a bit. Then went back and did 4 months in Spain, came back to the States, went back again. And I was like, I studied Japanese, let's go to Japan. So I'd studied in Japan for 9 months, Japanese language, culture. And it was funny because it was literally my, you have 8 semesters in college, and I was in my 5th semester or 6th semester. I had my last semester junior year, and I was, I'd been to 8 or 9 countries at this point. And I was like, the only thing that I've learned that has, been the same all of these times, through all of the places that I've been, is this basic concept of, liberty, of incentives, human innovation. And I was very curious because I was like, we have things that we're doing that are great in the US that they're not doing in Spain. And Spain has cool things that they're not doing in Japan. And Japan's doing cool things we're not doing in the US. And why are there these restrictions if all of these people have really great ideas and we're not learning from each other? I was very perplexed by this. But also the fact that the core tenements of liberty, of incentives, of property rights and how markets work was the same no matter where I went. And it made a lot of, it painted a new picture for me in addition to the cultural experiences that I was, learning about or living, just having this kind of framework of oh, this makes sense. No matter where I'm going, it still makes sense. It still holds true. And so I emailed my professor, I'm leaving track practice, last semester, my junior year, emailed my professor, said, hey, I want to learn more about this econ thing. And so he sent me some grad programs. I ended up getting into the Mercatus, with the MA fellowship at the Mercatus Center and studied my master in economics there. And it was funny because at that time, I was very passionate about international policy. I was like, yeah, international policy. I want to do this thing, rule the world. It's very complex. It's very, very hard. And that hit me. And then, we were doing, and I still distinctly remember starting my master's and being state policy. Who does state policy? That's lame. I wouldn't want to do that. International policy. Yeah. And then I realized that's the grass is not greener over there. And then, Mercatus does a lot of really good federal work, federal policy, things on the Hill. That policy, that work needs to be done. I just knew for me, I really appreciate being on the ground, being with the people that these things are affecting. And then also, in terms of timetables, some things can move a little bit faster in states than they can on a federal level or an international scale, especially when you're working with, different governments and different cultures and things like that. And so I became really drawn to state policy. over the course of my studies. And then the pandemic hit. So that was fun. While I kind of put myself in the boat with all the people who were in the movement that graduated like 2008, 2009, because I was like getting ready to come on the market. And then the economy, happened. And it was funny because I'll never forget being on the talking to people. I graduated in 2020. So my last semester of my master's was the beginning of 2020. And like talking to people, and they're like, you'll never work remote unless you're like 10 years in or 15 years into the movement. And I was looking in the movement because I was at the Mercatus Center, and the whole thing dried up. I graduated and it all dried up. Nobody knew what was going to happen to funding. Nobody knew anything that was going on. And it was kind of a shock because this was all I knew was the movement, and this is where I wanted to work. And thankfully, through the American Economics Association, they have a program for minorities students that are considering doing PhDs. So like, women, Asian, Black, and Hispanics, because they tend to be underrepresented in the field of economics. So I did that feeder program, heavily considered doing a PhD, and then got into SPN through a fellowship that I was doing and did the virtual SPN in 2020. It was thanks to those sessions that I actually found my job at Illinois Policy, because I was in a session, I was pitching about working for them, and in that room was who would then be my boss, the editor of IPI at IPI, Brad Weisenstein. He heard my whole pitch to them, and he was like, "We need to get this person." And so thanks to SPN, I was able to find my first job. Yeah, so we ended up talking and connecting. I connected with a bunch of people at that SPN, but it was funny because it was like first development, and then development handed me off to comms, and comms handed me off to Brad, and I went through the formal process. And then in January 2021, I was able to start at IPI as a storyteller.
That must have been a pretty good pitch. What was that pitch about? What was the pitch? Can you share? Or is that
I don't know. It was like a pitch. I was just telling him I guess what I kind of what I told you. I'd have to ask him because I don't even remember. But just like, hey, I have all these skills. I speak several languages. I'm like experienced. What blah 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 blah. And so I started, but it was funny that I started as a storyteller because I don't have like a formal background in storytelling, or even communications. I mean, my graduate, my undergraduate degree was Spanish, Japanese, and economics, and my graduate degree was economics with focus on policy. And so it's funny being a storyteller because it worked out in my favor that although I didn't have comms experience, I had people experience, right? I've traveled, I've been around the world, I made a lot of relationships. I understand, people and, their complexities and their nuances. And I'm very curious about just like you, like how people grow up and how those things affect the way that they learn. And especially being abroad, it was interesting to probe those things in people that have just grown up in very different backgrounds. And, again, with the international movement for liberty, finding people who have also found their ways, have also found their unique ways and stories to this idea of liberty and how crucial it is for human flourishing, right? And so that's what I did for them. I just would call people and say, hey, how is this affecting you? And people would spill all of their deepest fears and thoughts and things about how policy was affecting them. And it was just like a really cool tool, but just also a really cool experience because you get really connected with people that, it just takes a little bit of time. It's amazing if you just give people, those 2 seconds, how much, you can get out of them, because people, especially, post-pandemic, a lot of people had a lot of things to say, you're cooped up. But I still think the same is true, if you take that time to be intentional and to just ask people how they're doing and how things are going for them, you'd be really surprised at how much they will give in return. Particularly about things too, like with taxes or laws that were benefiting or hurting them. People are really passionate about those things, and especially people that are like, oh, I might lose my house, or I might lose my business, or, I lost my business because of this thing. And those are really hard stories to tell, but they're important to tell. And it can, be cathartic both for that person. And then also just to know that they're not alone. I think that was like my big thing with everything was like, hey, we're here, we're fighting for you. You might not see it next year or even in 10 years, but, we're here. We do care about you. We care about your story and what you're going through. And we want to help people not have to go through that anymore, which is why we're here doing the work that we're doing. And your story can make a difference, not only to lawmakers, but also to other people that are going through what you're going through. So they know that they're not alone. And so it was just a really cool job and experience, and that kind of combination of my love and background for policy, but also for people, and how that could make a difference.
I love it. So was that position something that you created, or they already like that's I'm new
No,
to this.
they needed a storyteller. So
That's
they had
fascinating.
4 or 5 people that were doing storytelling in their own rights. And they're like, we need
Huh.
someone who's just going to do storytelling, just going to do content. And it ended up being perfect for me again, which is, again, it's funny. And especially talking to people like, oh my God, I'm going to graduate. And it's like, I mean, I got hired to be a storyteller and I didn't have anything to do, I didn't know anything about storytelling, but they trusted me and it worked out really great. So, you know.
Yeah, it sounds so. What kind of experience did you glean about storytelling while working as a storyteller? Because you had these fresh eyes, you had an economy background, and all this, like I can think of many storytellers that would die to have a position of a storyteller. Because I'm coming from
Yeah.
an entertainment background. Not I don't
Yeah.
have a background in the network. And so to hear a position as a storyteller is like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful that people have these things.
Yeah.
What did you learn about stories?
Well, I think in general they're not enough, right? And I've heard that
Hmm.
this is something that the movement has talked about for a long time. And so there's like a lack of it. There's not enough stories that are being told. But
Hmm.
then I think one of the other things that's really important is that people, and this comes back to that intention and time, and it is time consuming, but that it's not transactional, right? A lot of these people, like I'm still in touch with, or I go back to them because we go back to them for other stories. And so just being really thoughtful about
Hmm.
like how do you follow up and continue to engage with that person even after you've told their story. And we talked at length about, okay, like let's get them to do an op-ed or see if they're open to media or see if they're open to video, or what if we have an event and bring these people together. Like I think it really makes a difference to people, because you don't want them to feel like they've just been used, right? That's
Yeah.
like the worst outcome. And that was something that I made very clearly going into it.
Yeah.
And also being intentional about like the types of stories you're telling, so like coming in as a Latina, I was like, I really want to make sure that, we hear enough Latin voices, even if I have to translate from Spanish, because I, was the only person that spoke Spanish, or, so making sure that those stories are told, and that, again, it just comes from that really authentic and organic place of, we're here to help you, we want to help you. Would you be so kind to get this to us? Because it's a heavy weight to carry. Someone's like giving you some of the most intimate parts of their life and then their struggles, and you have to take that seriously. You really,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a big responsibility. I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
so then that was your entry into the network. How is it that
Yeah,
you
my
now?
official entry.
Yeah,
Mercatus
yeah.
is an affiliate, so it kind of counts. But so I was very thankful that I kind of had been, again, in the movement for a while. So yeah, very thankful to IPI. They do amazing work. The team is awesome. And for giving me my foothold and my start in this, and also finding like my home in comms, which is really funny because starting at EdChoice, different people had asked like, if your background's in econ, why are you doing comms? And I was like, and even when I was traveling and learning languages, something that is really passionate to me is like being a bridge, right? So like I said, there's these disjointed things in
That's very
policy. People have
Japanese. That's
good
very Japanese.
ideas, having good ideas across different places that aren't getting across. It's like, how do we bridge those divides and gaps,
Mhm.
and that exchange of knowledge and exchange of information? And also because, having learned languages, I developed a special reverence for the fact that like there's something to be said for going out of your way to talk to somebody in their native language, because people are different in the different languages that they speak. You can express yourself differently, you can express ideas differently, and so you get to know people on a deeper level. And learning that just through learning languages has kind of transcended not just my communication with people, but also like economic ideas and policy ideas. And so it's like, how can I be that bridge, whether it's economists are brilliant people, but really stink at making economics fun. Policy can be really boring and annoying. There's not enough people making that make sense and make fun, which actually was like what a lot of people in the movement do. And so as an extension of that, how can I be that bridge of these things that are really important and need to be heard, and also like the people that are on the receiving end of that, and then making sure that that is communicated, or what they are saying through the storytelling, and making sure that that's getting back to the people who are writing the policy or the people who are doing the research. being that kind of conduit is like for me where my passion has been at. And so it's funny to be in comms, but that's why.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so you're there at IPI, and
Mhm.
then now you're at EdChoice. Take me through how did that transition
Yeah,
happen?
how did that happen? So I, again, having not had a background in comms, was very thankful for everything that I was taught in terms of, content production and storytelling and things through IPI. But I was also really curious about, I was like, it's kind of like Einstein could have the best idea, right? Eureka, the apple or whatever. Excuse me. But it's not, an idea is not worth anything if it doesn't get anywhere. And so that kind of birthed my passion for marketing, right? Because again, I was telling these stories. I really invested in these people, and obviously Illinois is a particularly difficult landscape. But it's not the messages or the stories maybe weren't getting as far as I would have wanted them to, or we would have liked them to. And so that kind of birthed the passion for me to understand more about those channels of communication. So not only is it important to have good content, but it's really important the distribution of that content and how you get it to who you get it to, right? Whether that's, through government affairs and relationship building, whether that's through marketing, which can be a really powerful tool, media, So that kind of part of comms became very interesting to me, and an opportunity opened up at Ironlight. They also do fabulous work for different partners in the movement. And they took me under their wings and taught me a lot about marketing, which was really fun, and more about what goes into the kind of it's a really expansive and broad thing. But learning those different channels of communication and how things get from point A to point B, and then it's funny. It's funny too, because I don't know like the different layers, but being curious and wanting to learn more, this opportunity opened to jump on the team at EdChoice, and I had met Chantal and gone through and it was funny because I think it was like one of those things where I'd heard of her, and then I was like, I think I've met you, but I don't remember. And then you look on LinkedIn or something, and you're connected, like what happens with a lot of people in SPN. And so I was connected with them and applied for this job, and it was just like a perfect fit for what I was looking for in terms of professionally and then personally in the ways that kind of I wanted to grow. And they're just an awesome team doing amazing work. So I'm like really thankful to be here. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm sure you're still telling stories. There's stories that we could probably that we
Well,
can.
that's like my next, talking about my next quarter is going to be doing storytelling, because it's been an interesting transition. And this is also like side note, one of my tips for everybody who's like, especially even recent grads, like I think this is something I came to terms with in my master's. Some of the best my best advice is to get experience in all three fields: nonprofit, for profit, government. You really want to understand like where you want to be. There's like a tons of different ways to be in the movement. There's tons of different ways to give back and use your talents. But I think those are like kind of three core pillars that everybody should do. And so I was really thankful, like being at Mercatus and IPI had the nonprofit aspect while I was in my master's. I also had the opportunity to intern in the Council of Economic Advisors. So I got a little government experience being in Ironlight, seeing the other end of the spectrum, and being in like private enterprise. I think that's like, for me, like I wish I had known that sooner. It was just, I was lucky and serendipity happened and I was able to do those things. But having those experiences really allowed me to figure out kind of where I wanted to fit in the world of SPN and of Liberty and use my talents. And I like the nonprofit. So, but also starting my own for profit. But for me, working wise and growing wise, it has worked out that, this is kind of where I want to live. So,
Nice. I'm going to remember that advice. Thank you for sharing it. That's good.
yeah, you're welcome.
That's really
I'm
helpful.
sorry I interrupted your question. That was my aside, but what was your question before I forget?
Well, no, I think you answered it. I think you answered it, that saying how that's kind of your next quarter is doing storytelling and things
Yeah,
like that.
storytelling. So, well, I was going to say that it's interesting switching from a state-based org to a national org. So there's a lot more stories to tell. There's a lot more partners and a lot of fun things going on. And so, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And in terms of communicating all of the, thousands of students that are benefiting from choice and the parents. And what's actually funny is I got to do that at IPI. We were fighting for the Illinois tax credit scholarship. And so about a quarter of the stories that I told there were school choice stories, which was really great experience when I was trying to apply at EdChoice and say, hey, you know what? Like I've actually already done some of this storytelling work and content work around education.
Hmm.
It was some of the most fulfilling work that I got to do because some of, you know, again, I'm still in touch with those parents. Like I've cried on the phone with them, you know, like I've met them in person. Like they're just really great stories. And you know, personally, you know, you again can leave out as a Christian was like super fulfilling work on just like this other level that like um a lot of these families that are going through difficult times, not only was moving to like a private school, in many cases, like a private Christian school, good for their kid and their education, but it really put them in places to have community at like
Hmm.
times when they needed
Hmm.
it most. And it was it's like something that maybe isn't talked about when it comes to choice, but it just happened to be a common theme that I would see or through the stories that I was telling that not only like are the kids safer or in a better place for them, but the parents kind of get to be a part of this community of like parents and teachers that has helped them through difficult times too. And so it's kind of like
Huge.
a two for one, you know.
That's huge. That's something that we understand very clearly. It's what we're trying to do with this podcast is that in this modern world, we're so fractured and we need that community. And so what you're seeing right now is the school choice actually helps solve these huge problems that we're seeing right now. And I'm really excited by that. I haven't heard that aspect of school choice before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean it's to your point, it's so necessary and so needed. I think community in these times. And so and that it goes back to the storytelling, right? Letting people know that they're not alone. And you know, if you create events for people or groups for people or social groups for, you know, online for people to just let them know that they are not alone and that there is community out there for them and people that are dealing with similar things. And so the storytelling can help kind of solve some of that. But then also, yeah, school choice and allowing parents to have those options too, because some of those smaller schools, like I can't imagine, you know, having a kid, you know, a kid in a public school and then, you know, not knowing the other parents or kind of only knowing the teacher on student teacher days and stuff. So, and that's not to say that that's every school, but just affording parents those options where they exist, you know, can be life changing and transformational. And I've seen it in the parents that I've interacted with there, you know, in the stories that I've told.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that seems to be a very specific impact that you've had. And I'm glad that you shared it. What about challenges? What are some challenges that you've had? Any specific failures that stick out that you can tell me how you overcame them?
Challenges in terms of like one of the challenges is it's just like, you know, generally like growing, right? So like running into different issues with like when I was storytelling, I had tons of leads and then had tons of people to call and you had tons of people in the pipeline. And it took me a really long time. And I'm still kind of working on refining like a good database system, right? For that. I'm sure you might know this similarly, right? You have a lot of people to call and follow up with and CRMs and databases and tools. And so that can be hard when you kind of don't know what you're looking for.
Well, it sounds like that's something that's a pretty common, like a challenge that I have, I know, and then other people have is just how do you keep track of all the projects? How do you keep track of all these different threads and make sure the projects are getting pushed forward well? I mean, that makes complete sense to me. What are inspirations that keep you going?
I think so those stories, right, of the people that, you know, we've helped and so that was like I think the thing that was really cool was in addition to building these relationships and like I said, seeing that, but like so we made this a lot to help kids, right? And I've seen it help kids like get out of bullying or you know, get out of a failing school, help the parents community wise. And then for me as a Christian was just cool, like seeing in my mind how like God used school choice as a tool to like help place those families in the community and
Mm.
give them the things that they needed. And so that was where that like those stories kind of transcended just like okay, this is like cool because kids are better off, but like they're not only getting faith, but they're getting, or sorry, community, but they're getting like faith and growing their faith. And for the parents that is important too. Like it was just cool to see like that also. And like, I feel bad. I didn't like you can keep or not keep, but um, like I said, you know, like crying on the phone with those moms when they've like gone through difficult times or being, and just like being there for them, you know, and like, hey, how are you? How are things going? And realizing that this has made a real impact on them. One of those stories, funny enough, it wasn't, I can't, she wasn't, I'm not trying to remember. I don't think she wasn't a school choicer. So it's funny because we were, you know, the labor union in Illinois tends to, especially CTU specifically, tends to strike a lot. And so we were doing some work, like labor related work. And this mom had spoken out because, you know, the schools were closed and she has several kids with disabilities. And, you know, it was really hard on her, you know, because you get extra resources at school, whether it's therapists or just different supports that can help, especially with kids with disabilities. And she was a single mom and had 4 kids. And so imagine trying to teach some, and then some have disabilities. It was funny because my boss was like, "Oh, this mom talked on the news, like see if you could track her down." And so doing my sleuthing, I found her and was able to get a hold of her. And we did a story on her, and then we did a follow-up story on her. And she actually hosted a press conference on her own in front of her school because she was like, we need to open the school. And I went there and I got to, like, you know, meet her in person and meet her kids and other moms that were standing there with her and tell those stories. And then it was also through that connection that later on when you know, Illinois Policy produced their recent CTU documentary, she was one of the parents featured in that. So like that was really cool. Going from this name in a newspaper to like now she's at a documentary and I'm at the premiere of the movie that she got to be in with her kids, and talk about, you know, take that story to like the ultimate level of like a full feature film. Where they're talking about the impacts of this on her and her family. So that was a really cool that was really cool and inspirational. Something else that was fun was, again, being bilingual. I had the unique opportunity to also do some Spanish media at Illinois Policy. So I'd be like, go on Univision and talk about our jobs reports. And through developing those relationships with the editors, I got to understand kind of what they were looking for in news stories. And Illinois Policy does a great job of putting out like these monthly jobs reports. And I was like looking at it and I was like, oh, like what if we did a breakdown by like demographics of this, you know, because it listed like this is this and this is like, you know, whites had this and Hispanics had this and stuff. And so I dug into the data and had found that it was like Black and Hispanic women were like were starting small businesses at greater percentages than any of the other groups. And then I got to pull in some of the stories of small businesses of women that were in those categories who were small business owners that fit. And so I put that together. I was like, hey, research, can you, you know, verify this for me? They verified it. We published it. And then I got to pitch it to the producer at Univision and then go on and talk about it. And so it was like being the news cycle was like also a really fun opportunity. Yeah, that was fun.
That's so fun. I love it. Okay, so back to something on the challenges. Now you're focused on not just Illinois now, you're focused on the nation. What are some of the challenges that you see for our country as a whole, especially in your role as, you know, a communications and content associate?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you talked about. We're at a really unique time. And I mean, I even feel it, you know, being an adult and working from home, of, you know, isolation, of like lack of community, polarization, right? And some of the tools that we can use to counter that include like those storytelling, that community, getting the word out there about these great things that are happening. Because you know, what do we have if we don't have each other other than the family? It's like family and then community, right? And we're out of time. And it's actually funny because at SPN, EdChoice, and this is like not meant to be self-promo, but you reminded me of one of my aha moments. One of my colleagues, John Christoph, wrote a paper on the 3 languages it's called The 3 Languages of School Choice. And he applies Arnold Kling's philosophy of the 3 languages of, you know, the right, the left, and the center on politics, and he applies that to school choice. So like all of these people across the aisle want school choice, but they are talking about it in different terms. So they're like fighting with each other kind of instead of working together. And as they were having this discussion, it like reminded me, they were talking, you know, saying like, you know, at the end of the day, people are people, you know, and we have to kind of get past the political garbage or the political whatever and just remember that people are people. And this is why some of the greatest like there have just been great relationships where, a staunch Republican and a staunch Democrat are best friends. And it's because they've transcended those political lines or ideas and gotten down to the core of humanity. And it reminded me that I was like, I need to stop vilifying some of the democratic socialists in my life and maybe like remind myself to look at them as humans instead of just like that. Or, when you're talking about labor and not thinking, oh, they're these horrible people, but it's, maybe the policies or the leaders in place. And some, we had to be careful of in our language at IPI on, not vilifying teachers, right? And remembering that, okay, it's like the structure of the thing. At the end of the day, these are people and they're doing good work. And so I think that goes a long way for everybody to just take a step back and think, are there people in your life or in your sphere, in your community that you're avoiding because, you're putting this kind of like, oh, you're a socialist, oh, you're a Republican, oh, you're a whatever on them, that you need to like take a step back and be like, okay, wait, they're human first. And then, how can we talk about those differences, or maybe just not talk about them and just be friends and never talk about them, So that was a huge kind of aha moment for me, that I had found myself creeping a little bit too much into the like, oh, you are this thing, so I will, don't want to engage, and that's not a healthy way to have community or just go about being, right? Otherwise, you'd have to avoid everybody and be a hermit.
Yeah, you'll be stuck in your echo chamber if you do that. And that's not healthy. That's not good for ideas.
No, at all.
Right, right. So good. Okay. I'm glad that
people that, sorry to cut you off. Yeah, like being people that perpetuate, this, and we talk a lot about ideas, making sure that we don't fall into that trap of doing it ourselves, right? Even with the people that we like staunchly disagree with, or, maybe, and you might be surprised. Like I was talking to someone who like was an anarchist and, from, and, we actually came to agreement on a lot of things, but, they were willing to have that conversation about these are the things that are terrible and these are the things that are great. And not being scared of that. Cause I find myself in that, some, in that bubble sometimes where I assume that people are maybe don't want to engage, because I'm always after, like I said, being that bridge, like a fair debate, right? If we can disagree, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to attack your character, I'm not going to attack your person. Like, let's have a debate of ideas. And I think that that's getting harder to do nowadays. But just because it is harder to do doesn't mean that we should shy away from it and be scared of it, right? And it's a tough balance to weigh. But getting back to people's humanity and finding those ways to respectfully, think about, okay, can we have an honest debate here? If not, cool, that's fine. But if we can, how do we do that respectfully and kindly?
Brilliant. Okay. Well, good. Thank you. I'm glad that we were able to facilitate that aha moment at the meeting. That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are your hopes and goals for the future of the organization there at EdChoice?
So we're also at a really unique time because school choice is on the rise. There's, like I said, a lot of parents. There's like a lot of really great stuff happening in a lot of states. So I'm just really excited for us to just do more storytelling, get those stories out there. What's it called? To keep expanding these ideas of choice. And it's funny too, because education, I feel like I kind of cheated because, I'm like joining and and we're on the upswing in education. But it is something that like, and I think I found this working at IPI, you have to be someone really special who like cares this deeply about caring about kids. And so I think that's what's really unique about being at EdChoice is we all, some people are married to or have parents that are public school teachers and or have been in private school or been in public school or been homeschooled. But we all at the end of the day care really deeply about kids and care really deeply about families. And so that's exciting. That's exciting to see that there are people that care about it, because especially, post-pandemic, we're just, not only with community, but we've kind of had to have this tough discussion with ourselves about what do we want, right? What do we want from work? What does the future of work look like? What do we want from school? What do we want community to look like? AI is coming. What do we want our society to look like? I think that's probably why we're having so much conflict right now, is we're kind of in this, like, we have to take a deep look at ourselves and think about what we're after and how we want to get there. And this is just one of those tools for us to reinstill that community, for us to reinstill, parents and the family unit and their rights over what their kids are taught and how they're taught, and giving them different options to find what works best for them. And so I'm excited that, we're having these discussions, and that there's a lot of technology and ideas and great people that are out there doing this work to try to push us forward and push us into a new era of education, and of, just society in general.
Love it. Okay. Well, I feel like we could talk for another full hour, but I know we're close to time, and I wanted to ask one last question, even though there's so many more. Who else who can you nominate for us to interview next on Neighbors in the Network?
For sure. This was really easy. So I have to recommend, and I don't know if you could like do a double or one or both of them, Alex Perez and Grauben Lara. They're both, I think Grauben is at Atlas, and oh no, I was just talking to her, Alexandra. I want to say she is at Cato. She was at Cato. Anyway, they run this really great program in addition to that. And I think through AF called Hispanics Forward. So they also realized that we have a lack of a talent pipeline of Hispanics, of Spanish speakers in the movement, and they created Hispanics Forward to start that. So it's a mentorship program that goes on for a couple of months. I'm a mentor. I just had an amazing mentee. I'm going to do it again. So they're always looking for people in the movement that are willing to help pour into mainly Hispanic professional, young professionals, and to give them kind of a taste of what this world is like, and just, general mentorship and friendship, kinship. I ended up becoming kind of good friends with my mentee. So it's a really, really great program. I love what they're doing. I love being a part of it. And so I feel like everybody in the network should know about them, should know about that. Find a way to be a mentor, or if you know of a student who is either in the movement or might be interested in the movement, have them apply and become a mentee so they can kind of get their feet wet. It's really cool what they're doing, and they need as much attention on that as they can get. So definitely I look forward to your conversation with them and their backgrounds and why they started it and their goals for that. So
excellent. I'll get the contact information from you afterwards. And if it's okay, I'm going to link to it in the description, this Hispanics Forward. I've come across it myself, so that I'm perfect. We'll link to it. Okay.
So, the funny side note too, because my former professor, Ed Lopez, is also of Hispanic descent, and he had reached out to me like a couple of years ago and was like, or maybe last year, he's like, hey, there's this program, Hispanic Forward, like maybe you should sign up for it or whatever. Send it to me. I was supposed to connect with Grauben, and he just like, his kid was sick, and I was trying, like it just didn't work out. And then funny enough, last year, we were both in GLF. And so I was like, hey, the guy that I was supposed to email, like, now you're here. So thank you, SPN, for finally letting me into GLF, because it was perfect timing. I really think GLF is great too, and more people should know about it. I'm really glad to be part of that network and community. And it's funny, like how people who, like this one person that I can think of off the top of my head, who like I sat in a seminar with randomly in Florida in like 2015, is now like, was also GLF. Like, so it's just funny how kind of those connections stay together. And I love what the network is doing to help foster that community and keep us together. So
excellent. Yeah, I'm excited by that as well. And GLF is one of my favorite. I help out with that newsletter, and I love helping out with the GLF newsletter. There's always so much good stuff. So nice. Okay, well, great. Well, Anne-Marie, thank you again. It was such a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm very appreciative for all the time you spent. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Neighbors in the Network, an offering from the State Policy Network. We hope that this podcast can serve as a place for empathy, understanding, and human connection. Please let us know about your thoughts in the comments section, and thanks again.